Hi, and welcome to the Calm Waves podcast. I'm your host, Dallas Cowan. I am here with my good friend, Justin Foster. I am so excited for this episode today. Just a little, jump right into it. Just kind of a little history between Justin and I as me, Dr. Cowan, Calm Waves, as we're just working through this idea and these innovative products. Justin has been at the forefront of bouncing ideas off, going, hey, does this work? He's added so much to what we're doing. So I am so excited, Justin, to have you here today. First, I want to jump into it. Give us a little bit of your origin story, how you got here, how you got into neurocognitive training and brain performance. So let's just go.
Well, Dallas, it's awesome to be here on the podcast with you. We've talked about this here and there along the way, and it's always great to spend some quality time together.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about before, we were jamming for like 20 minutes before this, so a lot of good content. So we have a lot to talk about. So this is not going to be our first podcast together because we will just run out of things to say. So yeah, tell me just about tell the audience, tell people. How'd you get into this?
Yeah, always a great question. And I love hearing these stories myself. I was an athlete growing up, ended up being a dual sport athlete at a small school in Virginia for college, played tennis for 4 years, ran cross country for 2. Then I got up the guts to tell the coach, like, I really don't like running that much. So thank you. But as a student athlete, just managing the demands and the stressors and time commitments and all those things on court, particularly as a tennis player, I noticed it more than anything else. I felt like there was more in me than I was able to demonstrate in competition. And that was really frustrating as an athlete. And, working with teammates and coaches and things like that, I really just didn't have the toolkit to work with to bring out the best in myself. And in parallel with that, I was getting an undergraduate degree in psychology, and in talking with my advisor and some other folks, realized that there was this sort of blossoming new infant field called sport psychology at the time. And to me, it was just like a dream come true. I was developing my own sort of dual degree program for sports management that then later actually became a sports management degree at my university, which was awesome. But trying to mix sports and my love for psychology as well, and mix those things together. So it was just sort of a match made in heaven, and was able to get some opportunity to do an internship. Actually, a teammate of mine had a connection in the Northeast, and so I went up and spent a summer in Philadelphia, working with this great husband and wife team who really got me started on the journey. To me, it was an exploratory opportunity to see, like, hey, is this something I'm really interested in? How does it work? What does a day in the life look like? And got to spend a summer exploring that. And these folks introduced me to not only what mental performance is in sports psychology, but also introduced me to bio and neurofeedback and alternative training strategies and methods. They worked with elite athletes and youth athletes and everybody in between, as well as business folks and moms and dads. They had a complete sort of mental health and performance clinic, if you will. And so that was a great opportunity just to get my feet wet and really set a tone of, what does this look like? And so decided to pursue that into graduate school, ended up getting a master's in sport and performance psychology and a master's in mental health counseling. That was my backup plan. Yeah, I can always get licensed, right? If plan A doesn't work out. So anyway, it's kind of comical. So that was kind of the beginning of that process. And went through those graduate programs, just thinking, okay, I'm going to work with athletes and, college teams and things like that. That was kind of the big idea at the time for me anyway. I love working with coaches too. Got some great internships through graduate school, kind of those were very much DIY, like, all right, go figure out, like, find some people that you can practice practice on, right? Need some guinea pigs. But I got connected with some really fantastic folks, and teams to work with, and coaches that were completely open and let me try things out and make mistakes and clean it up later and things like that, which was just really blessed. And then I got a job working for the U.S. Army and Special Operations Community. This was way back in the early days of that. And, I remember going to a conference one time, and these people were presenting on, it was a sports psychology conference, and they're presenting on the work that they were doing with soldiers. Like, we talk about performance and sports and, winning games and whatever. Like, what are these people doing with soldiers? And completely blew it off, actually, initially. And then the next year, I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. Like, this sounds actually rather interesting. And talking with some of my friends who had gone to those sessions, like, dude, you missed out. So anyway, that long story short, ended up getting a job working for the U.S. Army and Special Operations Community for a program that was based out of the Center for Enhanced Performance at West Point, at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point at the time. And that grew exponentially over the years that I spent there. Spent 10 years working with the U.S. Army and Special Operations Community. Had no idea, time flew by quickly, but what a tremendous experience. I mean, just blessed to work with so many amazing people, leaders, organizations, not to mention colleagues that I got to work arm in arm with through that process. Learned a ton. I got to do performance psychology, sports psychology, for 40 plus hours a week. Literally in the trenches in some cases. So,
Wow.
I didn't have to mix that with trying to, find some other way to pay the bills, or, I'm actually doing counseling work and then trying to figure out this performance stuff. I got to do that full time, every day, all day, through the night, sometimes, whatever it took. And that was just such a tremendous experience, and amazing groups of people to work with. I learned more in those 10 years, than I could possibly have imagined. And through that process, then ended up getting picked up by the U.S. Air Force to sort of switch services and help develop a program to train fighter pilots and develop cognitive performance, and specifically to use technology in that process. So when I was with the U.S. Army, we developed one of the, as far as I know, the first really what I call a mind gym or a brain gym for the conventional forces for the U.S. Army. And that was a training space that individuals and groups could come and train the cognitive processes of performance. So beyond, and we can get more into this, but sort of beyond, focus and self-regulation and confidence and those kind of things, really look at the neurological processes of, what the Army calls move, shoot, and communicate. And how do we really train the mechanisms of that, and what I call sort of the underlying components that allow those folks to perform at a high level under very stressful situations. How do we train that in different ways? And so, a lot of leaders were just concerned we don't get enough time to really train in a realistic type of environment. So how can we create some alternatives to that? And so we use a lot of technology in the development of that initiative. And then that's really what the Air Force was looking for in the training of fighter pilots, just help them process information faster, be able to make decisions more quickly. That's the difference between life and death in the air. So great opportunity. Got to work with fighter pilot community for 2 years. And then we went full time with the Excelling Edge, and working with a whole variety of different organizations today to deploy. We work primarily with teams and training facilities and some rehab clinics as well, on how do we really use technology to develop cognitive performance and help individuals see, decide, and react better under pressure.
Mm-hmm. There's no bigger pressure than flying at Mach 2 and trying to decide where the guys from Maverick, from Top Gun, type of situation. So yeah, that's the best place to go. Okay, what what does it look like? It's totally different than, is this fastball a curveball or a slider? Different types of stakes. What have you seen? I mean, since you've spent so much
Both happen
time.
quickly, just to be clear.
Yes, very, very quickly. Different results if you're not successful, but both happen very quickly. What have you seen?
The consequences are different.
Yes, absolutely. What have you seen from going from your journey starting to today? Like I know we're kind of jumping in right into kind of your expertise, but like, what have you seen that the leaps and bounds? What's been your thing? What's the one thing you've seen like, this is absolutely changed since I started?
Man, great question. I think data-driven training has been one of the biggest differences that I've observed.
Versus what? Versus what? Data-driven versus what's the alternative?
Versus likability, maybe.
Okay.
When I started out, right, if you can do develop a mental skills program, or as a mental coach, maybe come in and you work with a team or you work with an organization and you talk about what I call some of the basic sort of mental tools, things like self-talk, imagery, breathing techniques, things like that. And okay, now let's, you want the athlete to go use those tools in practice and in competition environments and things like that. But we were evaluated by like, either did the athlete appreciate, did they like the training? Mm-hmm. And maybe did it seem to help them perform any better or not? Those are hard questions to answer, because there's a lot of contributing factors, right? They have coaches, they've got trainers, they get injured. I mean, there's just so many factors there to determine, did whatever Justin do, those little tidbits here and there, did they make a difference in, the outcome of the competition? And so what I ran into over the years actually was leaders and coaches that wanted more objective data. They wanted to know, is this athlete better? Is this individual, is this soldier able to focus better now than they were before? And, there's different metrics that different types of organizations use. I mean, just the world of of data in sports and performance over this time span has shifted dramatically as well, but mostly in the physical domain, not very much in the cognitive domain. Mm-hmm. And so, really, I was trying to answer some of those questions beyond a self-report survey of, how do you feel in these situations? How do you feel in these situations? And the athlete's trying to, answer on a scale of 1 to 10, mm-hmm. Some questions about themselves, which is really limited by their level of self-awareness. And so trying to find more ways to have objective data to not only assess or evaluate, but also to identify progress in training. Are we moving in the needle in the right direction? What difference are these tools or techniques or strategies or whatever it might be? What are they having? So that's definitely one area that I saw have seen a considerable jump in. And I think in some ways, honestly, the field of sports psychology is still a little bit behind there.
Yeah, the follow-up question for that is, do you see that being implemented more into teams? I'm asking all these leading questions too, because I do, we're kind of on the same journey together of trying to go, let's bring more of these objective tools into these environments. So I do know that we are both on the same path of going, hey, mental performance today, there's a lot of soft skills. Hey, visualization's great, mm-hmm. or, self-talk's great, but let's actually really see how well they're able to do a Stroop test. Like, if we can do a Stroop test and they get better at that, we know that that's going to be a better outcome, for them on the field. Or if it's, focus.
I think of the way you all talk about it. I think of the way you all talk about it, that gives the athlete better hardware to work with, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's really valid. And one of the things that I think technology has advanced in, I totally agree that a lot of those foundational, as I talk about, mental tools and skills are really important to athlete development. And there's a lot of research behind that. I think one of the areas that I've seen, or that I try when I work with teams and organizations and maybe we're doing some, what I would say, mental performance and some neurocognitive training, or there's some overlap of technology usage there, is that technology provides a feedback loop
Mm-hmm.
that traditional mental skills training doesn't have.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I'm working with an athlete on a focusing technique and we're trying to help them focus on the task at hand and slowly extend that duration of time, how are we measuring that, right? And is the athlete more focused, now than they were 3 months ago? And those are harder questions to answer. But if I give them a tool, right, that provides regular feedback, athletes are wired for feedback, right? If I take a shot and I miss the shot, that's feedback, right? Was my slap shot, was I early or late? My hips open too soon? I mean, think about it on the golf course. Oh my goodness, like so many directions, right? But we get that immediate feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So technology gives, me as a practitioner, a mechanism to give that athlete more rapid feedback. I mean, these are principles of deliberate practice from Anders Ericsson in the 1970s and 80s, but they weren't really implemented, in my opinion, as effectively as they could have been. And thanks to developments in brain science and technology advances today, we can do this better. And so using things like neurofeedback or biofeedback or other tools and things that are in our arsenal, we can provide that feedback loop now. And now I can teach that athlete how to focus and lock in their attention so much easier, because it's not a trial and error feeling around in the dark, with my eyes closed kind of thing. That athlete now has a way to go, okay, I'm focused. And they look at, the app on their phone, right? And they, as they're like, oh, okay, I'm not as focused as I thought I was, right? Or I was focused for a little bit and then my mind wandered off. And I didn't even notice for, 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'm able to bring it back. And so we can shorten that duration. And that's just one small example, but I think technology really gives us an opportunity to shorten the learning curve and help athletes develop these core mental foundations much faster, let alone giving them better ways to practice it in a variety of different scenarios.
Absolutely. So you used a word a while back, and for the audience, neurocognitive. And I want to kind of go into the relationship between mental performance, neurocognitive training, and brain performance. I know we talk a lot about brain performance, but I want you to kind of talk about there's relationships, but there's also differences. So I'd love for you to talk about what you see as the differences.
Fantastic question. I think the way I look at it is we have mental performance, which is some of those core mental skills and tools that we've talked a lot about already, from confidence, focus, self-regulation, managing physiology to some extent. To me, self-regulation is kind of a slightly embedded category, maybe is a better way to put it, a large category within mental performance. And there's different ways to get after that. But you have that toolkit, and that toolkit's essential. And a lot of folks, I've worked with mental performance for the majority of my career, continue to, with teams, organizations, individuals that I work with, everything from coach development, culture development, to working with individual athletes and teams on, how to be confident in uncertain situations, how to focus on the right thing at the right time, how to bounce back from mistakes and failure. There's a lot of core foundational mental skills that I think that's mental performance in my mind. And there's considerable overlap then to training, but as you pointed out, considerable differences as well with what I call neurocognitive training. And so in simple terms, the way I look at neurocognitive training is really training the way that athletes see, decide, and execute. And I think I alluded to that earlier, but number one, understanding how do our eyes, 80% of the information that athletes use to pick up information and make decisions within the course of their sport experience, 80% of that is visual input. We're a visual people. And so a visual species, if you will, we rely heavily on vision. And so, a lot of our environment is geared towards that. And so how do we understand and train those visual components, those visual skills? That's sports vision training. And then there's the way that we make decisions. And do we understand how the brain does that when we have a lot of time versus when we have a little bit of time? And what are some ways to understand how our brain goes through the decision-making process. But also that's reliant more on what's called perceptual-cognitive training, which is built around anticipation and decision-making and how that brain now processes that visual input. So we see things, and then that gets put into our brain, and now our brain works through the relevance of it, what's relevant versus what's irrelevant to the current environment and the objective to the task at hand. But also rolling through our memory Rolodex of when have I encountered similar situations before? Oh, yeah, normally we do this. Does that work in this in this particular situation? If so, run script, right? And then that initiates the motor program to execute that particular response, whether that's a pass to a teammate or a fake on a defender, whatever it might happen to be in that situation. Then the motor program kicks in, and the athlete's able to execute that well-developed skill that they've practiced. And here's the beauty of the overlap, right? When an athlete is confident, bringing back the mental performance piece, they move through that loop. I think about it like a loop: see, decide, and execute. They move through that process more quickly. If an athlete is feeling anxious or hesitant, well, then that's going to affect how their visual search strategy. They're not going to process or perceive the environment as accurately and thoroughly as they should. They're going to be slower to recognize what's happening. They're going to be slower to make a decision, and therefore they're going to be slower to execute or react in the moment. So those mental performance skills overlap considerably to the way that we see, decide, and execute. And that's called athlete cognition. But I kind of use this term neurocognitive training because it encompasses, in my mind, the sports vision piece, perceptual cognitive training, and self-regulation. And those three components, to me, make up neurocognitive training, because we've got to hit all of those three components that are interrelated in order to elevate performance in the moment.
That's great. And then how does it apply, as you going down the list, mental performance, neurocognitive, and we talk a lot about the hardware. We talk about brain performance a lot. I know that's where we kind of overlap, but are different too. We don't go as much into the soft skills or the software side of things. We're looking under the hood going, all right, if you're anxious because you have a concussion, there's only so much confidence you can have to go, I'm just not working as well as I could before. We need to fix this. If your axle's off in your car, you can have all the confidence in the world. It's not going to drive as well as if you fix the axles. So that's kind of our side of it is being much more on the side of, or emphasis. We still do some of the stuff, but the emphasis is more on how's your brain performing, where, if it's concussions, if it's trauma, if it's, those types of things. Confidence doesn't fix that. You gotta go to the hardware and go, let's fix this.
Yeah. And if there's deficiencies or maladaptation in the neural networks, right, that's where brain performance is critical. And a number of things influence that too, from my perspective. I mean, sleep, nutrition, hydration, to me, those are basic factors of performance, but directly impact brain performance. And if I can get my, I love that. If I can tune my engine up, right, then I can do some sweet driving with it if I have the right skills. But if I'm still operating on a, with a Yugo under the hood, then I'm going to have some challenges, right? That we're going to redline real fast. Yeah.
Correct.
Absolutely.
And you've had a car accident.
That's where that connection point is.
Yeah. I look at it from car accident to, those types of things, or, tuning it up. Maybe you're tuned up pretty good, but hey, let's put some NAS in this. Let's put some, extra things to make it work really, really well. So when you do those decide, execute types of tasks, it's really, really souped up to where it needs to be, because we don't want those connected wires or, them to go, okay, it's got to go all the way around here, and then it shows up. Or the resiliency too. I think that's the other thing, is the fight and flight side of things. Is we really focus on staying out of the fight and flight and having more emotional capacity. That's the word we like to use, emotional capacity. So if you do miss that play, or you do miss that shot, you're not dwelling on it. You can go back into, go on to the next thing. Because that's where people get stuck in the fight and fight.
Kind of the way that I get after those pieces are helping people stay in the driver's seat and not let their natural reactions, specifically emotional reactions, run away with them, right? Stay in the driver's seat. How do we manage, regulate, interact with these things in a way that can facilitate better performance? And then also how we train to perform under greater cognitive load or cognitive stress. And we develop, just like when we go to the gym and we work out and we build a tolerance to lifting a particular, amount of weight, for example, right, on doing a squat. And then over time, I adapt to that weight, and now we need to add a little bit more. And so when I do, in terms of neurocognitive training and training sort of the cognitive processing and cognitive load aspect of things, we really approach it from more of a like progressive overload perspective. And what that does now is that's where that connection with the brain performance is, right? If we have a greater capacity, then we can exploit that and train it and continue to notch up our tolerance for greater amounts of information or greater amounts of stress, or how fast can I process that information in order to be able to perform and have a competitive edge.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you, we can talk about, the benefits and everything like that, but how do you implement this stuff? I know we can talk theory all day. We can talk, hey, yeah, this would be great if we could put this in every, facility. But, as you and I know, there are roadblocks, there are challenges, there's education challenges, there's so many different things that come into to play here. But how have you been able to implement this into organizations?
Yeah, fantastic question. I think it depends a lot on, what the outcomes are that we're looking for, what the time, what are the constraints in terms of maybe it's time, maybe it's logistics, maybe it's space, and what kind of problems are we trying to solve. But so I'll give you a couple of examples. In one scenario I mentioned earlier, we developed a kind of a facility or a space within a facility where individuals and groups could come and train these cognitive skills directly, right? And we had developed workout plans essentially that we could guide them through, with different stations and modules, and we would set them up either with a coach, or once they got the hang of it, they could kind of come in and do some things on their own. But it was a place that we could come and target and develop these individual skills, whether we're talking about vision training or we're talking about decision making and maintaining composure under pressure, and how do we do that while we're trying to make decisions and being pushed to a greater cognitive capacity. So doing that kind of in a more open group or individual type of environment is one way that I've done that. I've also worked with organizations where I work really closely with their strength and conditioning staff, and we actually design in cognitive training with physical training. The theory there is that, the practical reality is that athletes don't perform physically and mentally separate in any kind of competition, nor do the rest of us throughout the course of our lives, right? We're facing physical demands and mental or cognitive demands simultaneously. And sometimes I'm more physically tired, sometimes I'm more mentally tired. We have different resources available to us. So what I've done with a number of organizations is we bake in the neurocognitive training into the physical workout. So we can integrate specific pieces into different blocks of training. So it depends on the strength coach and what their training philosophy is and things like that. But we can incorporate like visual motor activation during a warm-up. So let's train some vision skills. Let's work on our visual search strategy, or warm up our ocular muscles, for example, or create better integration between our vision and vestibular system. We can do that in the course of a workout. And then we're going to have better movement patterns during the workout. So the strength, the physical training side benefits here too. During a speed and agility session, for example, we can focus on drills and exercises that focus more on reaction time on eye-hand coordination, or on quick decision making. So some of that's like deployed via software tools on maybe a giant touchscreen or on a tablet. Some things can be more hands-on and interactive. There's a lot of tools out there now, things like light systems that you can activate and deactivate, when you touch them or run by them or whatever it might be. A lot of tools around there for that. You can build that into speed and agility training. So if the strength coach is trying to develop speed and quick reactivity and movement as well, great. Then we can build in some cognitive elements to that in an intentional way. And I think that's kind of the big thing here. Or if we're talking about, so just different examples, right? Bake that into the workout, and we're training some of these vision skills, decision-making, anticipation type of skills into the workout. And then sometimes I'm working one-on-one with folks. And so it's like it's like going to a personal trainer, right? But that personal trainer is working more on your brain than your body. And in the reality, I do a little bit of both. But we're training the mind and body together again, and we do an assessment. We figure out like where their strengths and weaknesses are, what's most relevant for their performance context. And if I'm working with a baseball player, it's going to be different than I'm working with a point guard or a hockey goalie. Those are different skill sets from a neurocognitive standpoint. Different things matter more than others. And so we need to figure out, what do we need to train the right skills so that we can move the needle in the right direction.
I have a great story, or it's an impactful story of one involving you. So you were showing us one time the glasses that would blink on and off. Give me the name of those. I can't remember.
Yeah, strobe glasses.
Strobe glasses. So I'm with my brother, I'm with my dad, I'm with Justin, and he's showing them off, and he's like, okay, what you can do is take this tennis ball and you throw it up, and this is part of the training. I'm like, cool. So I put on the glasses, going with my brother, and he's throwing it back and forth. I said, okay, I'm gonna put the strobes on, and it's gonna be really hard to see. I'm like, oh wow, these are really hard to see. And my brother looks at me and goes, you can't see this coming at you very well? And he chucks the ball as hard as he can at me, and he hits me right in the gut. And yeah, so that was the strobe glasses introduction of, yes, it is very hard to see, especially when you have a brother who decides to take advantage of those strobe glasses. So that was one of those training sessions of dodge this.
There you go. Well, see what happened. You didn't follow the right progression of training, or you would have been ready to catch that.
No, it would have been great. My brother just said, like, hey, let me take advantage of you real quick. You can't see very well, can you? No. Oh, no. And he chucked the tennis ball as hard as he could at me. So
brothers are great for that.
Yeah, and dodge this. So if I got more training, I would be able to be like, yeah, let's do this. I always think of the scene from, it's the Star Wars thing of, nothing and being able to see it. But no, it's
that's right.
It's so funny because we think of this being like super futuristic, of like, okay, these glasses and whatever it is and Star Wars, but these things are they're today. I mean, they exist today. It's just being able to implement them is the biggest thing. I think not to because he's brought up in the news all the time, but that's what Elon Musk is doing a lot with these projects that he's working on. Is they're these huge things, but they bring so much technology into it. And so what I love about Justin, and we talk so long about these different subjects, is we're trying to bring in the future today, where we're trying to train things that people just don't think about, but they're so important with your everyday life off the field too. So not only on the field, but off the field. Emotional regulation is huge off the field. All of these things translate into daily life. So it's not just performance on the field, but off the field as well. I know we are on a little.
Just a quick story. So, we're working with a soccer academy, and, to your point about on and off the field, I mean, that was really their big emphasis in bringing us in to design some training and content development throughout the course of their academy system, really. And they're a little bit more centered on off the field stuff, off the field stuff from, academics, emotional regulation, social interaction, communication, but also the mental health and mental wellness perspective here, and making sure that these student athletes have the resources and the tools that they need to develop better self-awareness, self-regulation, ability to manage their mind and body more effectively for not only in the classroom, but then also on the pitch. And I think this is just the beauty of combining these elements together, and where, it's really about helping people be better versions of themselves. I really think a lot about what we do as helping people unleash their potential. And how does that happen? Well, it happens by transforming the way that you train and the way that we think about developing these competencies. I think physical training has come a long way in the last 20 years, and continues to, where more people are conscientious of what goes in their body, how they spend their time, how they're training, cardiovascularly, strength and conditioning, all these kinds of approaches here that people are more conscientious of now. And mental health and mental fitness are becoming more aware. There's more awareness around those things as well. And how do we, people have questions around, how do I do this right? How do I do it effectively? How do I manage stress better? How do I be able to be present in the moment with, with my friends or with my kids or whatever it might be? And so a lot of this kind of bringing the future to now is helping answer those questions and giving people practical, research-informed strategies and tools to improve their quality of their life at whatever stage they're in whatever performance context that, whatever arena that they go to battle in.
I love it. I mean, I think part of adding to that is data-driven, is being able to have a data-driven approach. And I love that answer of trying to not just say, oh, I felt better today, which is true. I mean, there are certain things of where talk therapy and mental performance of contextualizing situations is good. Purpose-driven conversations, love them. But when you talk about the next level of, okay, how is my brain performing? How is my how am I reacting to these types of things? Those are things that are just on the forefront. I mean, they're not common practices yet. And as you said, you're establishing brain gyms, or we're establishing brain health and performance gyms too, but they're just not a common thing yet. And that's what I love, the kind of these kind of types of conversations, just to be able to go, this is what you can do. Here's the process that can take place, and be a part of your team or a part of your life. So I think it's just such a fun conversation to have. So, well, anything else to wrap up today? I know we'll probably do part 2 and part 3 and part 10 of this conversation as we keep going forward. But anything else you want to just kind of leave with from somebody who's listening? Where can people find you?
Yeah, great question. You can certainly check out our website at theexcellingedge.com. You can follow me on Instagram, Justin R. Foster. And there we talk about some of these different technologies and tools that we use, the importance of training these neurocognitive skills, what all that even means. You can find all that there. Please engage, reach out. Our DMs are wide open. Love to engage with you, and we're happy to help teams and organizations, training facilities take their training to the next level. That's what it's about. The future is now. Some people are just going to get left behind. Don't let it be you, though.
Yeah, that's a great way to end it. I love that. That's going to go on our slide deck. The future is now, and some people going to be left behind. Do you want to be one of those? And trying to find those people that are like, no, I don't want to be left behind. I'm ready to go. Let's do this. So that's great.
Yeah, and it's not complicated. It's not hard. Jump in. Work with Conwaves does a fantastic job. The Excelling Edge, we love to work together some as well. Yep. There's great organizations doing fantastic work out there that are making a difference in people's lives. So the question is just, where do you want to begin?
Yeah, I think there's the huge thing is education gap is going, it just seems like these are huge machines. They've got to, you're thinking of like huge doctor practices. It's not. I mean, we fit it into a backpack. Like Justin does have one big one that's like a huge touch screen that doesn't fit into a backpack, but that's different. But it's not. We were able to talk through goals and again objective data, just to be able to bring that to the table and go, yep, you are seeing the improvement, especially on a team level, which you're working with 15 to 20 to 100 players. How do you do it at scale? And that's the exciting thing about this is we can do this at scale. So. Well, thank you, Justin. Thank you for your time. Love it. Again, I'll put in the description, whatever you're watching this, I'll put it, his information in there. So if you reach out, talk to him, follow him, it's worth your time. So thank you for joining me here today on the Calm Waves podcast. Love it. Thank you for coming. If you're listening to this much to this part of the podcast, thank you. So thank you, Justin. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Dallas. Always a pleasure.
All right. Signing off for now.